Now, Haryanto, I know this was decades ago, but perhaps you would remember the process of applying for secondary schools in your PSLE year?
Yeah, I definitely do. Well, there's a new scoring system for this year's Primary 6 cohort, and the Education Ministry has released the entry scores for the 139 secondary schools here.
The new scoring system assesses each pupil on their individual performance in the 4 subjects, regardless of how their peers perform.
Well, let's recap. Now, each pupil will be given achievement level scores from 1 to 8 for English, Mother Tongue, Math and Science, instead of grades like A star to E in the previous scoring system. So let's say one pupil scores 90 marks and another scores 99 marks. Both will still get an AL1 for that subject.
A pupil's total PSLE score will then be the sum of the achievement level scores for all 4 subjects. For instance, if you score AL1 for every single subject, you have the best possible total score of 4. Conversely, the maximum score you can get is 32 if you score AL8 for all your 4 subjects. So like the O-level scoring system, the lower your PSLE score, the better your result.
Based on the entry scores released today. Now, if you're applying to my secondary school, Hai Sing Catholic School, you must score within 10 to 16 for Express, 21 to 24 for Normal Academic, and 25 to 28 for Normal Technical.
And for my alma mater, CHIJ Secondary, the entry scores are different for affiliated and non-affiliated pupils, as you can see here. So how should parents use the data to pick the right secondary school for their kids? Well, senior education correspondent Sandra Davie joins us now. So Sandra, how can parents use the entry scores that were released earlier today as a guide?
Okay, there's quite a bit of information that they need to look through, and I know some parents will feel quite overwhelmed and perhaps even more anxious. But here are some takeaways for them and how to use all this information and data. So for one, they should realize that all these cutoff scores, entry scores, are based on last year's 2020 cohort's results and the choices they made of secondary schools. So yes, it's a good guide of the kind of entry scores that will apply to the schools this year as well, but it varies year on year depending on how the cohort as a whole does in the PSLE and the schools that they choose as their first choice or the 6th choice. So parents shouldn't see this as being cast in stone, but rather the cutoff point, which is the last student to enter the school, may vary year on year. And but MOE has already said that it may vary by only up to 1 achievement level. So let's take a school that has an achievement level of, say, 4 to 9. So this year it may vary 4 to 8 or 4 to 10, for example. Yeah, so they should expect that, but it's still a pretty good guide. So that's one. The other thing is that when the new scoring system was released, a lot of parents got very anxious and said, oh, so now if you want to get into a top school like RI or RGS, you need to achieve this perfect score of 4. Well, the simulated data actually shows that it's a broader range of scores. You know, you don't need that perfect score of 4. It actually ranges from 4 to 6, even for the most competitive schools such as RI and Raffles Girls' School.
Which means, which means you can get, let's talk about like RI, right? The 4 to 6 range.
Right.
So that means you can get the three points, or like 3 1 points. Like, you know, for 3 subjects, you can score 1 point, and let's say, you know, your weakest, shall we say, subject, you are given a bit more leeway to, you know, I guess, perform a little less well in
get a 2 or
and you can still stand a chance to take to RI, right?
So achievement level 1 applies to those who get 90 marks and above. So in a way, it's achieving the intention of changing the scoring system, because you don't have to chase the last mark. You don't need to get 100 upon 100, or even 95 upon 100. If you get 90, you still get A1, all right? And even if you don't get 90, you get 85, you get an A2, and you still can, you know, enter a school like RI or RGS, you know? So in that sense, it's good. It has its intended effect, which is to discourage pupils from chasing the last mark and to spend a bit more time doing other things that will develop their soft skills, which are becoming a lot more important, really.
So, Sandra, I just want to be clear on this because, okay, taking the RI example again as well. So, cutoff point 4 to 6.
Yeah.
That's only a 3-point range.
Doesn't seem that wide.
Yeah, doesn't seem that wide. But, you know, here you are saying that, no, actually more pupils can qualify.
Yes. So, a lot more pupils are likely to get this achievement score of between 4 and 6, right? So more of them stand a chance of getting into RI, right? But having said that, all right, if more students can achieve the score of 4 to 6, then the number of places available in RI every year, it means that you will have now more students tying for a place.
Yeah, oversubscription.
Yes, definitely.
Definite amount of space, but a lot more people.
Right,
So
right.
in the event that happens, Sandra,
yeah.
what are the protocols in place?
Okay, so the first thing that will count is your citizenship, whether you're a Singapore citizen, a PR, or a foreign national. Next will be your choice of school, right? So if you put RI as your first choice compared to another student with the same score as you, also a Singapore citizen, if the other student puts it down as his second choice, then you will have priority because you indicated RI as your first choice.
So in the event if, let's say, Singaporean gets priority, and then if I choose, okay, I chose, say for example, RI as my first choice, I get priority. What happens if all this is the same for 2 pupils?
Then what happens is that you'll be subject to computerized balloting, which is used for joint admissions exercise, for example, for O-level school leavers, right? So basically this that is done in MOE HQ, and it's computerized, so it will randomly pick some students to get the place and others, you know, won't get the place. Yeah.
Okay, so we know there's a lot of data, a lot of information to digest, and you mentioned also that this could actually result in parents becoming a bit more anxious actually. So what is your advice to them, you know, on picking the right school for their children and not say, you know, the top school in terms of entry points?
Right. Yeah, you're right, Olivia. I always emphasize that parents should really think about picking the best school for their child, not the best school in terms of the results, right, that they produce, that their students produce. And by the best school, I really mean that best fit in terms of the school ethos, the school culture. You know, no point picking a top school like RI or RGS or any of the top performing schools for your child if your child doesn't do so well in a competitive kind of school environment. Some kids do well, you know, in such an environment, but there are many others who don't do so well and who actually flourish in a less competitive environment, you know, where they're not faced with so much stress and anxiety, you know, over performing in tests and exams and projects and so on. So, you know, my advice to parents is always pick the best school for your child. You know, look at your child, reflect on what your child's strengths are, what your child's interests are. Do they do well in a competitive environment? Some kids do, but others wilt, you know, when they are faced with such an environment. So, CCAs are very important, you know. Schools got interesting CCAs these days, and increasingly around the world, not just in Singapore, everyone recognizes the fact that CCAs develop all these very important soft skills in kids, like grit, like determination, being able to overcome failing, that sort of thing. And we've all been going through the pandemic. We all know how important it is to have resilience, and to be able to pick ourselves up and get, going again. So, parents should really take into consideration these things before picking a school.
Right. I mean, education is multifaceted, right? It's
Absolutely.
not just the academic side
Right.
of it. It's
Agree.
also like what you said, soft skills, resilience,
It's
character
becoming
building
so
and development as
important
well.
because, the world is changing at a breakneck speed.
Yeah, definitely. Well, good advice there, Sandra. Thank you so
you.
much for helping us. And of course, our parents are watching us as well, make sense of this data that we've got today.
Yep.
And we've been speaking with Sandra Davie, Senior Education Correspondent at the Straits Times.